Remarkable people overcoming remarkable challenges with resilience, dedication, community, and grit. Listen as they share their stories of overcoming adversity. Open your eyes to what is genuinely possible for all of us. Authentic Adversity with host Chris Howe.
Welcome to another episode of the Authentic Adversity podcast. Today I'm sitting down with Adrian Stein. He's a hospitality professional, the owner and operator of Dope Cocktails. He has an incredible story of redemption and recovery. He's clean from street drugs for 3.5 years and alcohol for 14 years. Welcome, Adrian.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate you coming on here. And, you and I kind of got to know each other through a mutual friend of ours and have kind of been interacting, both in the meeting space of refuge recovery, but also just, on our own. We've kind of built a friendship. And, I appreciate you and I appreciate your story. And, you've always got some very impactful words of wisdom to share. And, I hope that today, in telling your story, that some people can relate to some of the emotions attached to some of the things in your life that you've experienced and get some inspiration in your story of recovery.
Yeah, thank you. And definitely been nice reward us meeting. Definitely our friend put us together, and sometimes at least for me, where I was at in my recovery at the time of the meeting, it was sort of like it was really nice to be introduced to refuge recovery and yourself, and just like sort of tap into community.
Yeah, for sure. I think that piece is really important. And wherever somebody finds the fellowship of other people in recovery, I think that's the bedrock of most people's recovery. We can't do this alone. So having that common bond and the common goal of staying clean and living a good life with proper intentions is really, really important. And I think that the more people we have in these spaces and the more relationships that we build in recovery, the better off we're going to be.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I just know from my own experience through the 14 years or so that I've been, chipping away at recovery, that, the support and community is, as you said, it's sort of like the foundation, right? At least it's for me, the community is the foundation to the support, right?
Absolutely.
So, because as we know, emotions come up and sometimes it's really hard to process or accept things on our own, right? So it's like always nice to have perspective or listen to other people's shares where I can learn. And it just feels nice to be amongst, like-minded people on the same journey.
I totally agree. I mean, we all live different lives and lifestyles. And for some of us, like, especially for yourself in the hospitality industry, there might not be that many people that you can speak openly and honestly about recovery that would understand the way another addict in recovery does.
100%. Working in restaurants for over 20 years, serving alcohol for the most part. I mean, most people, they don't seek a life of recovery, so they don't get it. So then when you're in an environment that maybe was part of the problem, it can definitely be very challenging.
I can imagine, and hopefully we can get to talking about the everyday challenges with that in your story. But first, I want to bring it back to kind of early childhood. I want to know, like, let the people know where you're from, how you grew up, what it was like for Adrian as a younger child.
Yeah, I'm 44 years old. I was born in Toronto. My father was my mother's university teacher.
Oh, wow.
So my mom was my dad's student. So they're 17 years apart. She came back after she graduated to become his teacher assistant,
Okay.
TA. And then I guess they hooked up. A couple years later, I was born. So I was my parents' first. My dad had a previous marriage before my mom. So I have two older half sisters. And now I have two younger, full sisters, but we're all one big happy family.
Yeah, that's
so
great.
We don't speak in halves, right? So super loving parents. I've had no trauma in my life. I grew up, like a middle class family in the annex, downtown Toronto.
Yeah.
I was given everything I needed, almost everything I wanted. My dad was a university professor. Sorry, I should back it up a bit. My dad actually is older. He's a Holocaust survivor.
Right.
So he grew up in Europe, in Hungary, during World War II, and lost a big chunk of his
Wow.
family. So my dad was he immigrated to the United States and then eventually Canada, where he met my mom. And so at the time, he was teaching a class on like sociology and genocide at U of T for many years.
Okay.
So I grew up around that. And then, and my mom and as well as my dad was also, he ended up becoming like a psychotherapist. And my mom was like master of social work therapist as well.
Wow.
So essentially, I got raised by two people in the mental health profession.
Yeah, I think that's important to talk about. I mean that, and the fact that like you came from a very loving household, that it wasn't like you were raised in a traumatic environment that might lead you to down certain avenues in life. Because I think a lot of people, when they think about addiction, they expect the story to be that they came from you know uh, either lower income or a very traumatic um, childhood, and that's not always the case.
Yeah, I mean, first time I went to treatment in 2010, things were very black and white back then,
Hmm.
and there was two statements made that I had a lot of trouble with. They said one is anyone who's addicted to opiates, it's a result of not feeling loved by their mother, and they made like a blanket
Wow.
statement that was like across the board, and I was just like, I don't
Yeah.
get that. And then they also said that all addicts have become addicts due to some sort of trauma that occurred during their childhood.
Right.
And I was just like, it actually really turned me off of the recovery world because of statements like that.
Hmm.
And I was just like, that doesn't apply to me. Maybe I'm in the wrong place. Maybe I'm not around the people I should. Maybe I don't even need to be in rehab because that didn't happen to
Right.
me.
That can be very detrimental to exclude somebody that's had a childhood like yours and has a loving relationship with his mother. That, okay, maybe this isn't me. Maybe I don't actually have a problem and I don't need the help that this place can offer me. That's yeah, that's
Exactly.
unfortunate.
Yeah. I'm grateful to see where things have come today, but like back in 2010, which was the first time I went to treatment, it was a very different world, and things were very like I said, black and white,
Right.
this way or that way, and that was it. It was either like our way or no way.
Yeah. That's yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to your childhood. You have this cohesive, loving family unit. What then? What point in your life were drugs and or alcohol introduced, and what kind of what was that like for you? And maybe you could talk a little bit about what alcohol and drugs did for you at that time that you may have been lacking or looking for.
Sure. So yeah, it's like, as I was saying, I came from a very loving family, intellectual, educated, good balance of everything. My dad was very big on values, core values. Like team spirit. He made sure that I joined, soccer, and that I was very I was very into hip hop, still am. He would take away like certain tapes because they were disrespectful of women, and just like I was raised with like really good core values, right?
Right.
So, but with that being said, I was a bit of a troublemaker. Like I didn't do my homework. I would act out. I never like was violent, but I broke the
Right. Right.
rules, and yeah. So like I was getting in trouble as a teen, like most teenage boys, not all, but nothing major. But so I didn't really explore the world of drinking and drugging until I turned 15.
Okay.
And actually, the first night I got drunk was the same night that I smoked pot for the first time.
Right. Okay.
And yeah, like I got super drunk with my friends, and like I remember the night actually vividly. It was like it was it was like I discovered something like a magical sort of ingredient to make my life, to make me feel comfortable and special. And I was always a social kid. I was always popular, guys and girls. But then when I hit high school, maybe the first couple of years, it was a little different. I wasn't as popular. I wasn't, talking to as many girls. So I was not feeling as confident as maybe like when I was a few years younger, right?
Okay.
And so discovering alcohol, all of a sudden I felt like I was cool. People were laughing at my jokes. You know what I mean? I'm going to the parties.
Yeah.
And I'm fitting in and I'm having a great time.
I'm smiling
right?
because
So,
this is so my story as well. And those were the same years. I mean, we're the same age, and so I can really relate to that. What drugs and alcohol brought to my life, it sounds like the same as was the case for you. When I talk about my story, I say for a while it was working. Drugs and alcohol worked for me for a while. Did you find the same?
you would think that, but it didn't, because I got drunk for the first time at the age of 15. And when I was 16 at a school dance, I got alcohol poisoning.
Oh, wow.
And I got taken out on an ambulance in front of the whole school.
Oh,
It was a whole thing.
okay.
I had to get I was taken to the emergency room with alcohol poisoning.
Mhm.
And I got kind of scared straight,
Oh, wow.
to be honest.
Okay.
My parents were cool, but at the same time they were like, no drinking for a while. By the way, we found the pot, and my parents were cool, but they're just like, maybe you shouldn't do that either, for a
Right.
little while. And I didn't really want to. It was like such a heinous experience, and I was embarrassed, right? So, and around the same time I got my driver's license.
Okay.
So, just shortly after, so I became the designated driver. So for the majority of high school, I didn't really drink that much. I got more into pot, and I guess that would be is when I first started. I entered drug addiction was with the weed. So
Okay.
because at the time it was like I was staying up all night. There was consequences from it, right? I was staying up all night. I wasn't going to class. I was spending all my money. I was, addict behavior was starting.
Yeah.
I'd say last year of high school.
Okay.
Right. And even then, I remember my parents who were cool with pot, they had no problem. Smoke your weed even in our backyard. But it got to the point where they were saying, maybe you're smoking too much. Maybe it's becoming an issue.
Yeah.
And I got in a big fight with them about that. And I was just like, let me live my life. Everything's fine.
Yeah.
I took a year off between high school and university. So I was living at their house and working full time, but still sort of halfway in between a kid and an adult. So thinking I knew everything.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, do you think at that point, if you had wanted to pump the brakes, that it would be even a possibility for you? Was it that habitual of a thing that
no, I was 100% addicted back then. 100%. It was really, I said, in hindsight, it was that's when the addict behavior was, activated.
Sure.
That was sort of the beginning of the descent towards my bottom,
Okay.
long descent towards my bottom. Yeah.
Right. This episode of the Authentic Adversity podcast is brought to you and sponsored by Another Road Drug and Alcohol Treatment Center. Another Road offers a client-centered recovery program tailored to every individual's circumstances. Their focus is to create a supportive, healing environment rather than a rigid, rule-based institution. Their dedicated commitment upholds the individual values respecting each person's desire for recovery. Another Road understands that every individual requires a unique and focused approach to their recovery. Certain modalities of treatment are introduced along with the tools necessary for each client. Located in a rural setting, their addiction treatment center for all genders provides the perfect setting for a transformative recovery experience and sense of belonging. The private residential treatment facility offers an unparalleled program with counselors that have in-depth knowledge based on varying years of experience in addiction. Another Road utilizes unique, individual-focused plans for recovery that address the complexities of drug addiction, alcoholism, and prescription medication misuse. They have a 65% success rate when clients follow their program. I know many people who have completed this program, and they have absolutely rave reviews. To learn more, visit anotherroad.ca. Okay, so then where do you go from there? You're in university after that year off.
So yeah, so I take the year off between high school and university, and I get introduced to the world of hospitality. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and I wasn't really like feeling it. And I had acquired a summer job as a barista
Okay.
at a very busy espresso bar in Yorkville, downtown Toronto.
Right.
So like fresh out of high school, literally like the week after high school ended, I'm working at this super popular hot place with celebrities and pretty women and fast cars, and
Okay.
it was an Italian environment. I was just like enamored by it and like instantly fell in love with the all of it, the buzz, the
Mm-hmm.
everything. So it didn't take me very long to sort of like present to my parents that I wasn't into going into university in
Okay.
September. I started the job in June, and by end of July, I was already lobbying for a year off. I managed to convince them to sort of, they gave me their blessing, and so I took a year off between high school and university, and then I was 19 and I was working with people who were like 25, 26, 27.
Right.
As soon as like the summer ended and everybody went back to school, this was my first year not being in high school. We started going to like nightclubs every night,
Okay.
right? Like we go out 6 nights a week, right? And I was like, not, I wasn't even used to going out, more than one. It was very new and it seemed very, very cool to me. I was working full time, so I had more money than I ever had in my life,
Right.
right?
That's a whole new world for you opened up.
Oh yeah, I mean, like I went to. It was like I'd never been to nightclubs really before. Now I'm going to nightclubs and I'm going to after hours,
Mm.
right? So, and then of course, I'd say, let's see if I do the math right. It was about 6 months before I got introduced to hard drugs
Okay.
through somebody at the restaurant,
Yeah.
and that was that was my entry into the world of illicit street drugs.
So what's the first thing you're introduced to, and what does that do for you?
So it's cocaine, and it was the New Year's of 98 or
Okay.
so. And yeah, so a friend of mine actually, who was very straight laced, had said to me, I'm really interested in trying coke. And so I was like, well, I don't know. I never really thought about it.
Yeah.
But a guy who I worked with, I knew did it all the time and seemed to really enjoy it. And so I went to him. I was like, hey, me and this buddy who he knew, we're thinking about maybe getting some for New Year's. And he was like, I insist you let me give you some for your first time. Like, I insist. He's like, welcome to the party,
Yeah.
man. It was like I got congratulated for like growing up, sort of, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he wasn't even a dealer.
Oh, really? Just somebody that wanted you to.
Yeah, like people, you're looking for a party buddy. We worked together. We
Yeah.
spent a lot of time together. We were always kind of on a different vibe because I smoked my weed and I guess drank back then, and he was always getting high on coke and drinking, right? So
Yeah. And I mean, coke's like that as a drug too. You want everybody else to be on it when you're on it.
yeah,
And
of course.
it's a very that's a dangerous drug. I mean, they're all dangerous, but like that to me, because it's such a social drug, and it's now and even back then it was still socially accepted in most circles. And it's kind of one of those things where you get like almost indoctrinated into this special cocaine club, at a certain point in your life, and then everything changes from that point, I think. Hmm.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it was. It was like all of a sudden I was like the code words and like the little winks and the handoffs going to the bathroom. I felt like I was
Isn't
part
it
of a
weird?
club,
You
right?
do feel
It was
part
like
of
you're like,
something, and
yeah.
it really, you start to notice, like your brain starts working differently. You pick up on gestures that you never would have picked up on before. You now know, like you said, the little codes and the move, the way everybody moves is different when you're in that world, right? And you view everything with such a different lens.
Oh yeah. And I mean, I even remember after trying it for the first time thinking like what a like not a big deal it was.
Yeah.
Like it didn't get me as messed up as I thought I would. And like I did a very small amount to start off with. So, it was like, oh, I feel great, I feel I'm up, I feel happy. I want to talk to my friends, I want to go talk to these
Yeah.
girls. In fact, I am talking to these girls, right? Like it
Yeah.
was like everything was amazing, right? And I even remember like the next day at work, with a little bit of a sniffle, thinking how cool I felt, right?
Oh yeah.
Just like, oh yeah, I know what that's from, you know. It's like
Yeah,
cool.
that's funny. Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you're in this world of, cocaine's introduced. You're obviously meeting and hanging out with different people, doing probably, your hours probably change a lot at that point, and you're getting, you're getting a lot more exposure into a different world than you had been used to.
Yeah, and I mean, also I should touch on the lifestyle I was living too.
Okay.
I was staying up until 5, 6 in the morning, 7 in the
Right.
morning. I was waking up at 4:30 in the afternoon because I worked at 5 or 6. I'd
Okay.
roll into work half an hour late, just rubbing the sleep out of my eyes at the age of 19. And I guess one thing I didn't mention too is I had a really, really bad sleep disorder.
Okay.
I could not sleep. I had like, I did like sleep studies, and like, in hindsight, I don't know if it was like, it started before I got into marijuana, and it was one of the appeals of it is because it started putting me to sleep,
Yeah.
and it would help me sleep. But then after a while, it would do the opposite effect. It would keep me up all night. I'd want to stay up all night to enjoy the high, right?
Right.
So part of the reason why I took a year off in between high school and university was I couldn't, I slept during the day and I woke up at night, and I said, why am I going to go to school? It's going to be a waste of time. I'm working in
Yeah.
bars. I'm making good money. I'm 19 years old. I'm making like, $1,000 a week, which is a lot of money back in
Right.
1997 for, a 19
Yeah.
year old. So I'm like, why would I go to school? I've already made it.
Right.
Right.
Right. Right.
So I was like, yeah, so mixed in with the lifestyle, yeah, and the cocaine didn't like ramp up right away, but it did sort of like turn into, I guess I should say maybe a month after I tried it for the first time, another friend of mine was curious about it, and we started doing it like once a weekend every
Okay.
week,
Right.
right?
Right.
Pretty much right away. Small amounts, but that was like our Friday night. We both were off Friday nights. We would, get a bag and a bottle, and then the two of us would like go hit the
Yeah.
bars and, think we would have a great time, and it never was, but we always tried to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From there, then, because I know that your story gets, there's a downward spiral at a certain point. What
Yeah.
can you take us there?
Sure. So we could just like say, so from 19 until 25, I learned, I heavily drank and abused cocaine. I was also
Hmm.
selling it. I pretty much almost right away after I left high school, I started selling pot, and then I started selling coke, and then eventually I sold like E and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So I basically sold drugs, like nothing more than like anything I could get my hands on for the most part. And I'm not talking like, at first it wasn't really like big amounts. It was mostly to my friends, right?
Right.
So and supported my habit. But being in hospitality, it didn't take long before, working in restaurants and being the bartender, word would get out. And so after a couple of years, I had a pretty regular clientele.
Right.
And it was a curse, I guess. I don't want to say blessing and a curse, but like it put money in my pocket and supported my habit, basically,
For
right?
sure. And what a perfect atmosphere to be, supplementing your income with, right? Like you don't have to go anywhere. People come to you.
Yeah, I mean, but I also worked like 50, 60 hours a week. I was working full
Yeah.
time. So like the money that I made from selling drugs, in my head was like, this is not real
Right.
money. This is like my play
Yes. Yeah.
money.
Yeah.
So, I'd roll around like acting like a shooter. And I really liked that too. Like it definitely helped feed the
Of
ego,
course.
right? People want to be around you. People want to be your friend. And like, and even at the time, even if you're aware of it, it's sort of like, who cares?
Yeah.
Like
It brought you
this,
something. It
yeah.
brought you something that, was valuable to you at the time, and you didn't care. I mean, and I've shared these same experiences that, at the time I didn't care what the consequence was, or the fact that I knew it was wrong. It was just like, no, it brought me the attention that I was looking for, and it made certain things in my life easier. So at the time, the pros outweighed the cons, and I just didn't care enough to worry about what I was doing being something wrong or something that was damaging to other people. Your headspace just isn't there.
Oh yeah, no, I mean consequence wasn't a thing. In fact, when people brought up consequence, in my head I was like, that's not going to happen to
Right.
me. That's not. I'm smarter than that, or I'll figure it out. Nothing like that ever happens to me. I'm
Yeah.
fine. Like it was like the ego was in the stratosphere in that sense. You know, it was just like, no, I'm good. Like even maybe 25 is when things like started really going downhill for me, and people started like my parents suggesting maybe I cool off on the partying, and like it's noticeable, and am I okay? And it's just sort of like my response was like, hey, listen, let me do what I want to do. When I turn 30, I'll straighten out. And in the meantime, I'm going to party my face off from my
Sure.
20s. I'm making a ton of money. I'm having fun.
Mm-hmm.
Leave me alone. Right.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of my attitude.
And was that enough to keep them at bay, to keep them from really pushing any kind of change in your life, or did you actually have to make some space?
My parents love like I love them, and they're amazing, and they've been so supportive. Their style of parenting has sort of been like, you make your own decisions
Yeah.
and you deal with the consequences of it too.
Right.
Which is, I think, a great way to approach it. And we've definitely talked about, I think in hindsight, again, like I definitely could have used a little more of a heavy handed, like sort of like just take control, but like, I don't blame them for anything. But yeah, they sort of were like, okay, we've communicated our concerns. You do whatever you want to
Right.
do. You'll see, so.
Yeah, I think
like,
that's an evolved way to think, right? Because with they really did let you see it firsthand. They let you experience it and come to the conclusion yourself that you did need help and that things were out of control. But at the time, they realized that them just telling you something wasn't going to change your mind. You had to experience it, feel it, and go through whatever hard times were going to come along with, or whatever consequence was going to come along with the actions and abuse of drugs. So, I mean, it's got to be a really, really difficult thing. Myself as a new kind of a step parent, to think about allowing my child the space to learn on his own, or to sort of have to prove it to himself that it's not my idea, it's now his idea because he's experienced the consequence. I think that's going to be a hard thing for parents to do, to sort of stand by. And I think a lot of parents out there, I mean, I know a lot of parents that communicate with me about their children who are still out there sick and suffering. They don't know what to do or what to say or where to kind of stand on things. They don't want to suffocate somebody with this, like, you need to change when the person isn't ready. But it's also very difficult to sit on the sidelines and wait.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I definitely commend my parents, for the approach they took, and I appreciate, everything, all the compassion that they've shown me over the years.
Yeah.
Really, what led me to my first bottom, I actually got introduced to heroin when I was 22.
Okay.
So I had dabbled with Percocets a bit.
Yep.
And I was outside of a restaurant that I worked at, and I made friends with a panhandler. I would give him money. I'd give him some weed here and there. So I was standing outside one night, and I had been up all night. I hadn't slept. I stayed up all night partying, and I was standing outside getting some fresh air. And the panhandler comes up to me. He's like, "Wow, pal, you look fucked up. Like, are you okay?"
Wow.
And I was like, well, he's like, "Your pupils are the size of saucers. Like, did you sleep last night?"
Yeah.
I'm like, "No, I didn't." He's like, "You party?" I'm like, "Yes, I did." And he's like, "Well, what do you do?" I'm like, "Well, booze and coke." He's like, "Oh yeah." He's like, "You ever try heroin?" I was like, "No, are you crazy? Absolutely not. I would never do that." He's like, "Oh no." He's like, "Have you ever like popped a perk?" And I was like, "Of course, I love those. Those are great." He's like, "Yeah, well, that's what it feels like." I'm like, "Oh really?" He's like, "Yeah, if you want to try it, let me know." And I was like, "Oh, I would never do needles." He's like, "No, you can sniff it."
Right.
I was like, "Oh, really? Well, it must be expensive." He's like, "No, it's $30. I'll get you, a point." Okay, here you go. So I give it to him. He comes back, and I go home, and I think the next day, actually, I tried a little bit, and it was like unbelievable. It was like just like I entered a different realm.
Yeah.
Right. And I tried it the once, and so after that, I told my best friend at the time that I tried it, and he wanted to try it. So for like 4 years, we would do heroin once every 6 months and play video games.
Oh, really?
It was just like, it wasn't a regular thing. The only guy I could get it from was this panhandler.
Yeah.
And 9 out of 10 times I gave him my money to get me, he would just not come back with it.
Right.
So it was just like, I was just like, forget it. Like $400 later, I haven't gotten anything, right? It was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
but
You
every now and then he would show up with something, which like, like a little bit of a teaser.
okay.
So I'm dabbling with heroin and perks, but mostly coke and
Yeah.
booze. And when I was 25, I was dating a girl, and like a woman, I should say. And she was like she was great, professional. Like she worked for U of T as a fundraiser. I'm like this burnt out, strung out bartender. Like I shouldn't say that. Like my lifestyle, I'm strung out, but I'm career wise, I'm starting to like excel. I'm starting to get noticed. People are saying like I doing things that other people aren't,
Okay.
and like the mixology scene is starting to pop off a bit. I'm big into cocktails,
Hmm.
so it's like this like crazy sort of like double life. I'm definitely not being faithful to my girlfriend. I'm just living this like really shitty. I'm being a shitty person
Right.
for the most part.
Right.
Like I'm not violent and like in terms of hurting people, but I'm not being respectful towards others. I'm selling drugs. I'm late for work. I'm just like this like unreliable sort of like, but people think I'm a nice guy and I'm a good bartender.
Yeah.
Like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I get away with it,
Okay.
right? It's like, oh yeah, Adrian's cool, but fuck, he's always late. He's never this. He's never, but he makes good drink. It was like one of those things, right? So
Yeah, you got like they put up with the behaviors because when you actually did show your performance was was worth it for them, and you had friends, you had like you were part of the scene, and I can see that being like somebody's bringing value to your business and to that whole scene, so it's like they let the other things kind of slide, right?
yeah, they let it
Hmm.
slide. And at the same time, I'm like, I've got this like crazy, like in my mind, I know I'm talented at what I do, but I also know I'm a piece of shit, right? So I've got this like these like mixed emotions and like this guilt and
Yeah.
shame, which eventually drives, perpetuates the drug
Okay.
use. It's like, okay, I'm really good at what I do, and everyone says I'm great, but at the same time, I know that I go home and do all this coke, or I'm cheating on my girlfriend, or whatever it might be, right? I'm selling drugs to people, or right? It's just
Yeah.
like I'm not being a good person, and I know it.
Right.
So, I'm young and I'm dumb, and I think I don't care. And so, eventually, the girl breaks up with, or the woman breaks up with me, and it just destroys my world. Even though I was not a good boyfriend, so I had about 3 months before she broke up with me was the first time I abused heroin on my own. I acquired like a large
Okay.
amount, and I sniffed all of it to myself. Like I was just working. I was just like hiding. My dad had open heart surgery. I was really stressed out about
Hmm.
that, and I was just like not in a good place. I had dabbled with heroin, like as I said, I could only get it from this panhandler. So I asked my regular dealer, who was getting me my other supplies, if he could get it. And since he was like a big
Yeah.
dealer, like he only got me a large amount. There wasn't like a small bag, and he basically tossed me like the size of like a softball worth
Oh,
of
wow.
heroin, and says, "Here, just chip away at it. We'll figure it out down the
Okay.
road." Yeah, so I'm just like, okay, I've got this like chunk in my hand. I'm like, okay,
Right.
right. So when normally I had like a little tiny bit, and so I obviously like I start chipping away at it, and I'm like sniffing it. I didn't know about withdrawal. Like it doesn't come with instructions or
No.
like a warning sign,
Right.
right? So, just things aren't going well, and eventually I figure out about withdrawal, and I end up flushing the rest, and I get very
Yeah.
sick. First time going through like heavy opiate detox, had no idea what it was like. And during that time, the woman I was dating, she like nurtured me, like she sat next to the bed and gave me soup and rubbed my back, and I was just like, and I woke up out of this like state, and I'm like, I'm in love with this woman, or I thought I was. And a few months later, she breaks up
Wow.
with me,
Yeah.
and it just crushed my world, right? And so I'm 25, and the only way I know of dealing with life is through some drug, coke to go up, heroin to go
Yeah.
down, booze to make the sketchiness go away, weed to put me to sleep. It was just
Yeah.
like pills to put, like it was one of those things, right? Just one substance after
Right.
another. And I decide that I'm going to start doing coke every single day.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
going to go home
Yeah.
after work. I'm going to do coke every day because I sold it. So I had a lot of it, and it just helped numb my pain.
Hmm.
And that was exactly the moment that I like my addiction switch turned full on,
Okay.
and I never looked back after that.
Yeah.
It was 2005,
Okay.
2006. It was like that's when the party stopped and the darkness set in. It was only dark times after that.
Yeah. So the party stops at this point, and you can pinpoint this time in your life when the darkness sets in. Can you kind of paint that picture for us?
Yeah, so it was like August 2000 and let me do the math, 2006. Yeah, my best friend in the world, longest friend, decides to move across the country and like leave permanently. And most of my friends are moving away, and my girlfriend breaks up with me. So I'm like, at this point, I'm just like, my world is over. Like I've never experienced pain like this before, right? Like I can't think, I can't sleep, I can't nothing. Like my life has ended, and I don't know why. I've never, like I said, I've never experienced such immense emotions that I had no control
Right.
over.
Complete sort of unmanageability at that point.
Complete unmanageability, and just like she broke up with me and basically couldn't really give me a reason, but what she told me was that her mother felt that she could do better than somebody working in a restaurant and
Okay.
wanted her to dream bigger.
Yeah.
And when she told me that, I was like really upset because I was making good money at the time. I was apprenticing in the kitchen and working the bar. Like I couldn't, even though I was living a unsavory lifestyle, I was working really hard,
Mm-hmm.
not really paying attention to the fact how I treated
Right.
her,
Right.
like it was like, or that maybe that she wasn't really impressed with the way I was living my life. Like that didn't, I was just like, how could you do this to me?
Yeah.
And so she wouldn't really give me a reason other than
Okay.
that. And that was really difficult. So I got flooded with a million
Mm-hmm.
insecurities, things. Maybe it's because of this. Maybe it's because of that. Maybe she broke up with me because of this thing I said, or that when I wore that, or the way I look, or whatever it might be.
Right.
Right. And I just can't accept the fact that it was probably because of my shitty
Yeah.
behavior, I was unfaithful to her, and like that's when it really hit me. I was like, what a piece of shit I
Yeah.
am,
Yeah.
that's when I was really reflecting on, like, I am a piece of shit of a person,
Mm-hmm.
and I really drummed that into me. And that, I mean, little did I know that I was like, digging myself a grave with that sort of mentality.
Right. Building
But
this like
yeah,
negative
that's yeah.
self-image that is just gonna, that I'm sure at that time, the only way to fill that sort of empty void that you knew was more alcohol, more drugs, and kind of further into that hole.
Yeah, I mean, like, let's fast forward to the
Mm-hmm.
winter after. So I've already been abusing drugs for, let's call it 3-4 months. I mean, like, I lived in a basement apartment, like in a nice area too. And all I would do was I would wake up, I'd wake up into Coke. I didn't even drink that much alcohol.
Right.
And most people like do this. I would just do Coke and like sketch out lying by myself, like on the couch in the basement. I had a dog at the time, with my dog. And like, it was just, it was insane. It was just day after day after day. I would miss a lot of work,
Mm-hmm.
call in sick. There was actually a point where I couldn't even get to work on time. They were sending the daytime bartender to wake me up.
Oh wow.
Like, he would come home at
Yeah.
5. I'm supposed to be at work at 5, and I get to work most days around 6. And they're not firing me. They just think I'm messed up. They think I'm like I got issues, but they're still sticking with
Yeah.
me, which is insane,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like, they're literally having a guy knock on my basement window when I'm already 20 minutes late for work to wake me up so I can get to
Right.
work. And I roll into work strung out, and then somehow piece together a shift and then do it all
Yeah.
over again,
Yeah.
5-6 days a week. It was so, even talking about it stresses me out,
Yeah.
It's just
For
like
sure.
such a bad lifestyle. So that type of lifestyle lasted, a couple, like a good solid year and a bit. And finally, that was when I first sort of reached out and asked for help.
So when you were asking for help, what form did that come in? Like, where were you looking for that help?
So my best friend who had moved to Israel, like, he was the guy who left town when I started my, my daily
Yeah.
use. He comes back into town, and he's just like, "What's going on? Like, what's up with you? Like, you don't seem great." And I'm like, "Man, I think I have." I'll never forget. I remember we were like driving around and we're just talking. He's just like, I think I have a small cocaine addiction." He's like, "Why do you say that?" So I tell him. He's like, "First of all, there's no such thing as a small addiction. Like you're either
Right.
addicted or you're not, right? This guy's
Yeah.
a non-addict, right? And
Right.
he just like breaks it down for me like right away. He's like, from what you told me, you're like full on addicted. He's
Yeah.
like, how can I help you?
That's a great friend.
Yeah, he's my longest best friend to this day. He like I've known him since I'm 5 years old, right? And he's just like, what can I do to help? And I can't even recall what it was, but we're talking a bit, and then I think he suggests I talk to my parents. I reach out to my parents, and the first thing that gets suggested is I go to a meeting,
Mm-hmm.
an AA meeting, right?
Right.
And I'm just like, right, sure. I'm just like, okay, sure. No, I need to talk to a doctor. I need to talk to a therapist. And my dad, who's well versed, he's like, I have a lot of clients who are addicts in recovery,
Yeah.
and they go to 12-step, and this is where they get clean, right?
Right.
And so I'm like, okay. So I walked into my first meeting, January 2007 or so, and it was at a place called the Sanctuary
Mm-hmm.
in downtown Toronto.
Yeah, I know it.
So yeah,
Yeah.
so a lot of it's like a homeless, like a respite site
Yep.
essentially, right? So I'm like this, arrogant hotshot bartender working in Yorkville,
Right.
right? So I roll in and I see homeless people and I roll out. I'm like, not the right place for me. I'm in the wrong
Yeah.
place, right?
Yeah.
Of course, down the road, I'd end up being right next to those people, right?
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
but I was just like, this is not where I'm going to get well. Sorry, you guys have it all
Right.
twisted.
You're going in there comparing rather than trying to relate to the stories or the emotions, right?
I didn't even stick around for the meeting to
Yeah.
start. I just walked in and I saw, homeless people drinking coffee out of styrofoam cups. I'm just like, no, 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 no. I need the meeting for bartenders from Yorkville. That's what I need.
Yeah. Right. Right.
I need people who understand how hard my life is. I need people understand what it's like to work in my environment, and like,
Right.
like that whole thing. If you had the job that I had, you'd use too. That type of
Okay.
thinking, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I had this like terminal uniqueness attitude where it's just like my situation's
Yeah.
different. I'm different. Like, and even at the time, I'm like, I'm not even an addict. I'm just like going through a hard
Right.
time. So then, after that, like, I definitely wasn't clean, but I sort of like reeled it back. I cooled off a
Okay.
bit. I was managed to like, you know, pull it back and sort of, use quietly behind closed, because by this point, there's no like acceptable using in anybody's
Right.
eyes. I'm a drug addict to lots of people, and like I need to be
Yeah.
clean, and I'm not sure, I can't recall where everybody else's views with drinking, but I think I still was like drinking a
Right.
bit, right? Beers here and there. And I was getting really, really bad hangovers and really bad acid reflux from alcohol. So I gave up alcohol on my own in 2008.
Okay.
I just decided it was no longer for me. I hated
Yeah.
it. And like, I didn't like the way it worked in my life. But I continued to use drugs, right?
Okay.
And Coke without alcohol, like, psychosis sets in.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it really does. It makes
yeah,
me like my hands are getting clammy even just thinking about that.
yeah,
Doing blow
exactly.
with no alcohol. Yeah.
Exactly. So like, I mean, auditory hallucinations, like
Yeah.
paranoia, staring out the window, flushing things,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it might be,
Right.
right? So I was very aware that Coke wasn't working for me, but I was also a drug addict and I needed
Yeah.
something. And so I went through 2008. So this is like a year of me sort of like in white knuckling it, slipping and sliding, they call it, right? Just like little bit of clean time, then not clean,
Yeah.
do good, then have a bender, and that's just like that lifestyle. So during that time, I built a restaurant with my friends. We discuss about like there was two partners. I'm the third person. I sort of ask if there's an opportunity for a third partner. They communicate yes.
Okay.
I build the restaurant with them from scratch. I go in. I'm not getting paid. Blah blah blah. 2.5 months later, we open up. I sit down with them and I'm like, when can we sign the paperwork? And it gets communicated to me that I'm not going to be part of that restaurant. I'm going to be part of the next one, but I'll be an owner without ownership. I'll have all the same privileges. And I'm just like,
Right.
3 months of construction for free.
Right.
Like, what are we talking about
Yeah.
here? What are you telling me right now? Right? Like, what are you, no, don't worry. You can eat for free. You have your friends come in, you can comp them the drink. And I'm just like, that's not the same
Yes.
thing. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm really mad. And then at the same time, the restaurant is a top 10 restaurant, top 10 new restaurants in
Oh,
Toronto.
wow.
It's killing it,
Yeah,
right?
that's gonna
Line
crush
up
you.
down the street. It's just crushing
Yeah.
me. I'm so upset. My resentment is building and building and building, right? So rest. So I was there for 6 months. The place is one of the top places in the city at the times. And, but I'm like fighting with my friends who are the owners. They're not, maybe doing things the way I felt was
Right.
fair with the money, just like, it's just an unhealthy environment, no boundaries, toxic, and, huge resentments now. So I'm mad at them for like the way they're treating me. They're mad at me for my lifestyle and the way that I'm behaving and the way I look when I show up. And it's just like, it's not working for both
Right. Right.
parties,
Right.
right? So we end up having a bit of a difference of opinions and we part ways. At the same time, a good friend of mine, he loses his sister to suicide online. It was like all over the news. She was like coerced into killing herself online, and it was
Oh,
like it was
wow.
a really hard thing for my. Yeah, it was awful, and it was like it was a hard thing for my friend, but it was like for the group of friends because it was in the media, and like then she was found. It was just like I separate from my what I thought would be a partnership. My group of friends were all going through like a hard time together, and my dog almost dies, all within like 10 days of each
Right.
other. And I'm just like, I need something. I can't do coke. I don't know what I'm gonna do. And then it hits me. I haven't touched heroin for 3.5 years,
Oh, wow.
right?
Okay.
And it hits me that, oh, there's another drug I can maybe try again, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the only person I knew was that panhandler who had a pay-as-you-go cell phone that was off most of the time. And so I remember thinking, I'm going to text this guy, and if he calls back, then I'm going to buy some. But if he doesn't, that's the universe telling me I
Okay.
shouldn't. But of course,
That was the time he got back to you. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And this is also the same time that OxyContin, like the market was flooded with OxyContin.
Yeah.
And so he's like, I can't get heroin, but I got these oxys, which was much cheaper than heroin at the time.
Yeah.
So let me try it. And it was exactly what I wanted. It was exactly the medication I was
Yeah.
looking for. And I started using every single
Wow.
day.
Hmm.
Right. So it was like it didn't take very long. And then, short after that, I land a job that I really wanted for a very long time, working for a celebrity chef in Toronto, really high end restaurant. It was like a top 10 in Canada
Okay.
restaurant, and the manager is somebody I'd worked with previously at a different restaurant. And he's like basically very straight up with me. He's like, I really want you to work here. Like, I think we could really use you.
Right.
I think you do really well financially and professionally, but I'm going to be honest with you. You have to be clean.
Okay.
He's like, you can't be the way you were 4 years ago when we worked
Yeah.
together. Like, he's like, we're all adults here. We have mortgages. We have children. This isn't a place for party animals. This is a place for hospitality
Okay.
professionals. And I'm like, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Right.
Hmm.
Um, and so the first 3 months, I'm perfect. Like I'm dabbling, but I'm like hiding it in a way. I'm managing it. They can't tell. They love me. But then, of course, as things go, that manageability wears off. My use ramps up. I get sold bunch of like fake pills that I sell to a bunch of people at the restaurant. All of us get super sick from
Oh,
it.
wow.
Some people don't show up to work the next day. One guy ends up in
Hmm.
jail. They all blame it on me. So now everybody knows. Like, my employer's like, oh, I heard that you sold these pills to everyone in the restaurant. That's why nobody showed up to work.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm just like, that's not true. And like, so, but now I'm marked, right?
Yeah.
It's like the same story. People are just putting up with this crappy behavior because I happen to have good work ethic and I work really hard and I'm good at what I do.
Hmm.
Right. So I'm just like, it's not helping me because in my head, I'm like, they're not going to fire me. Like, they can't replace me. Like, it's just like the whole thing is just like this messed up way of thinking. So 2008, I win this big cocktail competition in Toronto. I get put in the newspapers as Toronto's best bartender. That was part of the prize,
Okay.
right? And so I'm in the media, and back then, like the mixology scene, the bartending, it wasn't big yet. It hadn't blown up. Even though it wasn't a big deal, it was presented as a big deal.
Yeah.
And I started getting people reaching out, brands, other restaurants, other bartenders, because I'm now like, I'm working for Celebrity Chef and I've just been dubbed Toronto's best bartender,
Hmm.
right? And I won that competition on a night after staying up all night doing coke, and I sniffed an oxy before the competition. So I think the drugs are helping
Right.
me, right?
Right.
And I'm just like, yeah, they're making me creative, and it's my magic, it's my secret ingredient. It gives me the edge over everyone.
All the myths we tell
Yeah,
ourselves to get, keep us in our sickness. Yeah.
exactly. And so that I'm now a full blown opiate addict. Daily user. I'm not doing coke. really that much. Maybe dabbling, but it's just oxys for the most part. And I just go on this run for the next 8 months, and it basically results in full blown opiate addiction. And I get caught. There's a big. I have another girlfriend. She catches me. She tells my parents. She breaks up with me. It's this big whole thing, and the result is I end up on methadone
Okay.
maintenance. That was like I go to CAMH. I end up on methadone. The methadone stabilizes me, keeps me from going on opiates, from using the opiates. But like as we both know, you can't just take away the substance and not replace it with a solution,
exactly.
right? So basically, they take away the opiates from me. I'm on methadone, but there's been no sort of treatment or any sort of model for me to follow. So I go back to coke
Yeah.
because I can't get high on opiates, right? So
Yeah.
because the methadone blocks it. So I go back
Yeah,
to the
right.
coke. And so now I'm taking methadone and I'm doing coke every day and I'm smoking weed and I'm still doing heroin every now and then. Because if I would miss my methadone dose in my head, I was going to get dope sick. So I had to get the heroin. So it's like I'm on methadone, I'm doing coke every day, and every now and then I'm using heroin, I'm smoking weed. Like it's obviously a really unhealthy lifestyle.
Yeah.
It's not
Right.
working. Another incident happens with a dealer coming to my work, making a scene. My employer and my parents sit me down and just like, you're a really talented guy. Your job's waiting for you when you get back, but you need to go to rehab.
Okay.
Right. And, I was in some financial distress at the time. And I told my parents, I'm only going to rehab if you guys bail me out. I'm in a jam with a dealer who's like after me. And, I'm behind on my rent. And so my parents were like, they wanted to do their best. So they said, okay, we'll lend you the money. We're not going to give it to you, but we'll lend you the money to get yourself out of the jam, provided you commit to your recovery, right?
Okay.
So I end up going to treatment for the first time, and that's where I went to treatment to get off the methadone and to stop using coke. So by the time I got to treatment, I wasn't doing heroin. I got introduced to 12-step. And I can tell you honestly that I sat there for 28 days. It was 21 days at the time. And I didn't believe a word of it. Like I just put on the smile. I went through the motions. I pretended like I really thought I wanted to fake it till I made it, but I didn't believe any of it. Like
Yeah.
all of it sounded like hocus pocus.
And that's important, I think, to mention, because a lot of people do this whole fake it till you make it, or and they just take up a seat in the rooms, whether it's at a treatment center or in the rooms like recovery meeting rooms, and they hope that somehow they're going to gain freedom in recovery through osmosis, just from being in that environment, being in the meeting space and taking up that chair, but they're not willing to do any of the actionable things that are required to actually be successful in recovery, right?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, it took me a long time to get to that point, but also I think that part of the problem was the way it was taught.
Okay.
Because 12-step is very, uses a lot of religious language, sounding language. There's excerpts from the Bible. And if you happen to come from a family that wasn't Christian or didn't grow up with that, it's really hard to separate the two, right? So, we're going to church basements every night for these meetings. I come from a family that's Jewish. We're non-practicing, but I'm not used to being around crosses and Bibles and being in churches.
Right.
And it's making me uncomfortable because they're telling me it's not religious, but they're reading the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what is happening
That
here?
part can be
right?
very confusing, right? Especially for somebody who's not
Right?
in that space, in the Christian or in that space. It can be, again, another thing that excludes you from, or it doesn't purposefully exclude you from the program, but it can make a lot of us feel excluded because that's not part of our life, and we don't want to feel pressured to become part of a certain sect or denomination or religion itself. So I know for myself that was a big thing, why I would go to different 12-step meetings, and then I'd say no, this is not for me. I don't want to be. I feel like it's a cult. I feel like it's this. I feel like they're trying to get me to go to church, or they're trying to get me to believe in something that I don't. And that was my excuse for leaving. And I was looking at the minutia of the wording and the environment instead of being there and just relating to the people and being in touch with the stories and what can I learn from other people there.
Oh yeah. I mean, I did definitely identify with certain individuals, and I definitely bonded with people, and I could relate to a lot of the
Yeah.
lessons. But the religion part and like the way it was taught and the language used was definitely my biggest roadblock. And as I shared previously, I didn't grow up with any trauma, but what I've come to sort of like unearth and realize is that my trauma was inherited from my father, who lived through the
Right.
Holocaust and like lived through atrocities. He's like written books on it, so I know his
Yeah.
story. So coming into an environment where I'm sort of be having someone else's religion almost forced down my
Yeah.
throat, I'm like, this is not respect. Like this is like I already have like a lot of problems identifying with the religion I was born into. I already have shame around it.
Yeah.
Like and now I'm being told, just suck it up, buttercup, don't worry about it.
Right.
Like, I don't see stars of David all over the room with you guys being okay with it. Like it's, you know what I mean? It's just like, so I was like really turned off from it. And the teacher, like the rehab counselors were so, at this place I went to, were so hard edged 12 step that it did borderline on Christianity. They'd be like, what's the big deal, pal? So what? So you go to a church, so you say the Lord's Prayer, so you get on your knees and pray every day. So I'm like, that's not part of my religion. Like, why are you telling me to do that?
Right.
And I don't even identify with my religion.
Okay.
I don't identify with any religion. I don't want to be part of a religion,
Yeah.
And I didn't have the tools or the knowledge at the time to separate the difference between religion and spirituality.
Okay.
Even though they did their best to explain it,
Yes.
I couldn't get it. So basically the result was I didn't really bond to 12. I still went to the meetings.
Mm-hmm.
When I left rehab, I lasted 45 days or so
Okay.
before I relapsed. Right.
Right.
So and in my head, I was like never gonna relapse. I'm fine. I'm not like all you guys who lost your homes and lost your this and like DUIs. I'm good. I still have a home. I still have a job. Right.
Yeah.
Like,
Isn't it funny when we say that?
but you know what they say in recovery? It's
Go
yeah.
ahead. You got it.
Exactly. That's like you haven't lost that stuff yet, right?
Yeah.
So I had been featured in the newspapers as one of the only sober mixologists in the country at the time. It was like a big spread in the life section, except there was one problem. I was already relapsing. I
Right.
was using, and I'm claiming to be sober. I'm telling people how good it feels to be clean and sober. I'm like preaching in this article about how to be clean and sober, but I'm using,
Yeah.
right? And I know it. And
Wow.
I'm like really ashamed about it. Like right before they took my picture for the newspaper, I went into the bathroom and did a line of heroin. And then I'm like posing for the newspaper for
To
being
be
this
the
like
sober
sober guy, right?
bartender.
It's like,
Yeah.
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 Okay. So I get like somebody reaches out to me from McGill University and asks me if I'm willing to come speak on it. And I'm like, of course, right? But I'm using.
Yeah.
So uh so I go to my source, my guy, the panhandler guy, who's like my main source, and I say to him, like, how do I kick this stuff without getting sick? I can't get sick. I can't go get dope sick. I can't go through this. Nobody can find out that I've been
Right.
using. Like, I need to secretly kick this drug that nobody can kick. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like
Yeah.
thinking, so he's like, I don't know, man. That's a really tough one. But the only way I would know is that you have to basically taper yourself off, and you have to do smaller amounts every single day. So every day, single day, you need to reduce your use by, let's say, about 10%, and you'll probably get a little sick at the end, but it should be manageable. I said, okay, that's
Okay.
good. He goes, but the only way you can control it, I know, is through IV. And I said, okay, so what does that mean? He's like, so I would suggest you get yourself 10 syringes and you fill them up. I'll help you fill them up. And each syringe will have less and less and less. Finally, till the last one will just be water. Right. And I said, okay, sounds
Okay.
good. So I'd never used needles before. He sets me up, and I'd been adamant against using
Mm-hmm.
needles for years. I even went to rehab the first time and bragged to all the other heroin addicts that I'd never used
Yeah.
needles. I was like, that was part of my like, I wore that on my chest with pride. I'm an opiate addict that doesn't use needles.
Yeah.
So here I am going against the thing I said I would never do, right? As we said, yet. And the guy takes my hand and he injects my hand, and it relaunched my addiction. It was a whole new
It's
drug.
like
It was a
nothing
whole
else. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
exactly, right? And so I went home, and he didn't really show me. He just did it. I went home and I took the rest of those syringes and I plugged them all. I figured out how to shoot
Yeah.
up with them. And like the next day I called him. I'm like, I need 10 more. Our plan didn't work. I needed to learn how to do it. So we'll start again today,
Isn't that wild? You got hooked on IV
into needles to
use
get clean.
while trying to get off, like, with the least amount of damage done, or the least amount of like sickness having to be had,
Yeah.
right? That's wild, man. Geez, that
I
it must have pissed you off, Here you are with what you're seemingly well intentioned. I'm trying to get off drugs, and now I'm hooked on shooting the dope, rather than sniffing it or smoking it.
It took such a grip on me that I forgot that I was trying to get clean, to be honest. I didn't care. I was like, oh my God, what was I doing this whole time? Why didn't anybody tell me how good this was? And a friend of mine who I went to rehab with, who's now deceased, unfortunately, he passed away from overdose.
Yeah.
But we went to rehab together, and he contacts me and he's like, yo, how are you doing with your recovery? I'm like, not great. He's like, same with me. I'm relapsing too. Let's relapse together. I was like, great, let's do it. And this guy was expert level needle user.
Yeah.
So he came over, he was like, no, don't do it like this, do it like
Yeah.
that. And it actually turned out we actually even had the same drug dealer, which was crazy,
Okay.
right? So we're like, with opiates, it's an everyday type of drug. So between our two sources, or three sources that we both had and stuff, we're able to always score together, right? So I'm like not getting dope sick. I'm always, and needles are new to me. And like, at this point, my job, where I'm working, has already given me a leave of absence for rehab. They're very aware of my addiction. They're very aware that I'm supposed to be in recovery. They're very aware of my situation. So they're constantly watching me, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think about that. So again, it doesn't take very long before I do something stupid. I was using at work and I threw a syringe away in the garbage, thinking no one's going to see it. And the cleaner found it, right? So
and they obviously straight away came to you, right?
Yeah, and they're like, "What's up? What's up? Are you diabetic? What's like?" And I'm like, "It's not mine. It's not mine. It's not mine." I just play dumb. Just play dumb. One of the managers wants to see everybody's arms, right? And like, I'm not there that day. Apparently, he like inspects everyone's arms, and they never asked me because probably they didn't want to see the truth, right? They didn't want to know. Like, but eventually, I get fired I get let go of the job. They're just like, we can't have you here. I did some like sketchy move with money where I like took money from the cash box with the intentions of paying it back while the restaurant was closed. And then I did put it back, but they had noticed that it was gone. And even though the money was back, they're like, there was $100 missing from here for a week.
Okay.
Like, you know what I mean? It could only have been you. You know what I mean? Like, it was sort of like, we know what you did with the money type, like you're not well, the money's missing, like we see what's going on, right? We have to let you go. So that crushes me, and my parents don't know what to do with me. Like, I go to CAMH, I go to medical detox at CAMH for 2 weeks, where they clean me up. And there's a big sign again, it's just detox, there's no treatment. Right. So it was like there's a big sign in the place that said, when you go back outside and use again, make sure that the amounts are much smaller, because your tolerance will be lower. It didn't say like if you relapse. It was like when you relapse. Like it was just like, and I read that, I was just like, wow, like I actually even used while I was there. It was just, I'm like, I want to get clean, but at the same time, I'm not ready, right? So I end up back at the same facility, a year and a half later, and the counselors are extra hard on me, and I'm beaten, like I'm like beaten into a new state of willingness. All of a sudden I'm listening, I'm like believing, and I guess suggested I go on for continuing treatment to a place in King City, like secondary treatment, which is where I met the person who would be like my sponsor for 10 years. And I got into the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and learned about 12-step. It was like, I got indoctrinated with it.
Right. What year is this?
That is 2011.
Same year I got sober. Since then, you have not drank. Am I right?
Yeah. So 2008, I stopped drinking. And I can't remember the exact time I had my last drink, but I can kind of remember my last drunk.
Okay.
And it was like August 2008. So 14 years or
Right.
so.
It's incredible.
And just was, yeah, thanks. People give me respect for it, but I say, it's something that it just didn't work for me. It would be the same as you eating a cup of dirt. Like,
Yeah,
it's like there's zero desire, right? So
for sure.
don't give me too much
Well,
props
but
there.
I mean,
Like,
like you just said, you did get deep into the big book, and you started to learn about addiction, and you had a sponsor, and you know what I mean. So for that, I'll commend you for that. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
having
for
that
sure. No, for
sponsor,
sure.
doing the work that's required, and actually going through the actions and the work, and dealing with. I'm sure if you're doing step work, you're dealing with things in the past and that sort of thing. So for that, I mean, I think that respect is for sure deserved for that piece of it. Even if alcohol
Fair enough.
wasn't
Yeah.
something that you had any draw to anymore, it doesn't discount the work that's put into step work.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And like the difference was this time was I was outside of the city because previously I was going to rehab 2.5 blocks away from where I was meeting my dealer. It was really difficult to detach from, like, I even saw my dealer drive by on our way to a meeting one time.
Yeah,
Like, so triggering. And like I can honestly share right now that while I was at rehab in 2011, I used a couple times.
right.
I like I actually got caught with my urine screen and I made up some bagel story, poppy seed bagel, and they bought it.
Did they
Like,
really?
for some reason they didn't kick
That
me out. Yeah, they
that
didn't kick
story
me out.
wasn't old enough for them at that point. Like,
No, they bought
yeah,
it, right? Like it was just like, I don't know. And they're just like, oh, I don't know. Okay. Me leaving the city to this other treatment center really helped because I found that once I knew I couldn't get it, I stopped wanting it. Like I wasn't obsessing
right,
over it. But while I was in Toronto, knowing that it's around the corner for me, I could not detach and get into program, right?
right.
So that was really good. And then what made a big difference was this individual. He took out the religious language
Okay,
and he put it into layman's terms. And when we were going through principles or excerpts from the book, and I would ask what that means, he would just be like, let's say, for example, humility. Humility is such a big definition. And I'm like, what does humility mean to the program? He's like, oh, it's simple. It just means to be teachable.
okay,
And I'm like, wow, like, like even though it can go, I just needed that, something to grab
for
onto.
sure. Okay, so Adrian, what happened 3.5 years ago, prior to your, quitting the substances that you were using at that time?
Okay, so from 2011 until 2019, I put together about, I don't know, that's 4.5, 5 years of clean time, but not consecutively, right? I had like 3.5 or so, 3 or so, and then a year twice, right? So
Right.
my last relapse happened in October 2018. I'm not sure why. I was clean for 13 months. I was going to meetings. I just spoke at a detox facility. I was doing all the things you're supposed to do, right? I got equipped with all this knowledge. I had gone to rehab 4 times at this point. I lived in sober living for 6 months. I did everything, right? I thought I hit my bottom. I went through another messy breakup, and I was not happy with where I was professionally. And I got a phone call from one of my old drug dealers one day, and he was just like, "Hey man, I've been thinking about you. Was wondering if you want to meet for a coffee." Right. And I was like working out a lot at the time. I just got back. He called me when I was at the gym, and I went home. I took a shower and I grabbed a spoon and I left my home. Right. With the intention of picking. Yeah, it was just like that. Like clean and sober, working a program, got a phone call, bam, I'm going. Like it was just like that. So
yeah, that really speaks to the power of addiction and the power of like the opportunity presents itself, and without hesitation, that's what you go. When do you leave a house with a spoon? Like,
no, I mean, I knew I wasn't eating yogurt.
Yeah.
Like I knew what I was doing. So
yeah.
And when I met him, he didn't even want to sell to me. He was like, I legit wanted to see you for a coffee, man. Like I've been thinking about you. I don't want to sell to you. And I'm like, you're gonna sell to me. You knew I was gonna ask you. Like, why do you know what I mean? Like you're cool, but so he's like, okay, well, I'll sell to you, but I'm not gonna sell to you every day. I don't want to see you get back into it. And he stuck to that, right? So I started calling him a lot, and he's like, no, I'm cutting you off. Sorry, I'm not going to be part of this. Right. Like,
Wow.
and so I mean, in one
The
way,
ethical
it's
drug
nice,
dealer.
sort of, but the problem was he sold heroin, and he's the only guy I know that sold heroin. So when he cut me off, I went somewhere else, and they sold fentanyl. Right. So, and I didn't know that, and it fucked me up so much. Like, I am lucky to be alive, but I had to titrate myself up on it. I spent a whole weekend in bed, just slowly administering more and more into my system so that I could handle it without puking. Like,
Right.
I couldn't even walk. It messed me up so much. Like, and I was so sick that it didn't stop me from using, right? I needed to figure out, how can I get this drug into my body that I can still use it, right? And so, unfortunately, I found a way to do that. And it got to the point where that even eventually I hooked back up with the heroin dealer. His heroin, like a large amount, wouldn't keep me from going into withdrawal. I couldn't even use heroin anymore. I had to use fentanyl. And that was a really scary place to be, because with fentanyl, the effects are much stronger. It wears off much faster, and the obsession to use is much greater. So, and the detox is much, much more painful. So I was in big trouble. I was in distress, and I knew it. I was going down the tubes very, very fast. I went through all my savings. I went into debt again. I watched myself spiraling out of control. So I go to my doctor, my family doctor, who's partially responsible for me being alive today. Like, he has helped me out so much. And he says, okay, Adrian, I'm going to be honest with you. Like, I've been watching you for 4 years. I saw you do good. He's like, you were on Suboxone. It didn't work. You have two choices. You go on methadone, or you go back to rehab, or you're going to die. So I guess three choices, right? He goes, and I said, well, I can't go to rehab. I don't have the resources. He's like, then you go on methadone, or you're going to die, right? Okay. So I went on methadone, but the deal we had was that I wasn't going to stay on methadone. As coming from someone who'd been in 12 steps, someone who had already had some years of clean time, sobriety, I said, I don't need to be on this. I might need it to stabilize, but I don't want to stay on it, right? Okay. So I get on the methadone, but I'm still using fentanyl because it takes a time for the methadone to replace. You have to like swap it out, titrate up, it's called. So in the meantime, I go through the rest of all the money I have. I lose the job that I had. I lose basically everything I have left, right? And I end up in a state where I lost my job. They let me go with no reason, obviously probably for using. They didn't tell me why, but they handed me like $1,400. My rent was due that day, where my share, I had a roommate, was $1,100, right? And I had no other money. And I spent all of the money on drugs over 2 weeks. I didn't pay my rent, right? And then my roommate gave me his $1,100, and I spent his $1,100 too. So then the month end comes, and my landlord's like, hey, you're a month behind on rent. What's up? And I don't have the new month's rent either. So I'm 2 months behind, right? So basically I got clean. The last time I used was March 18th, 2019. I tell my parents, like, they're devastated. And like, this was a huge, huge difference for me. It's like, part of the reason I didn't come clean was I didn't want to disappoint my family. I was scared what they were going to say. And I told my parents, and they said, we know, we can tell. And my mom, instead of giving me scorn or giving me headache, both my parents just like came up to me and just like gave me a big hug and just said, don't give up. Right. Wow. And it was like, hard to talk about.
For sure. I mean, that's a huge thing. I think it's a big, I think that's something that's really important for people to know, that, when an addict is coming clean and hitting that rock bottom, they're not looking for, like, sometimes all they're looking for is a hug and for somebody to say that I believe in you. And that, like you said, don't give up. They're not looking for punishment or ridicule or any sort of anything in that sort of language. It just, we're looking for comfort, and we need that. We need to know that somebody believes in us, because at that point we don't even believe in ourselves.
Right? That's exactly what it was. I didn't believe in myself, and I needed somebody else to. I needed somebody else to like tell me that I'm going to make it, right? Because I wasn't sure. And so just that faith that they had in me, and like that compassion and acceptance, they asked me after that. They said, what can we do for you? And I don't know what happened, but I think just like that display of like love and, like I said, compassion. Just like the path was clear. Like I had that sort of like burning bush moment. I told him, I said, I know exactly what I have to do. I know what I can't do, and I know what I need to do. All I ask for you is that I can sit on your couch, sleep on your couch for 2 weeks. Help me while I get clean. Help me, with some basic necessities, and then I'm going to go out and get a job, and I'm going to fix everything. And I did that. I did that exact thing. I stayed on their couch for 2 weeks. The last day I was there, I arranged for a job interview. I went out, took the job interview. I got the job. I started working 2 weeks clean. I could hardly walk, and I'm like pushing myself, and I just kept on telling myself, like, this is what you need to do. You need to go through this pain. This is what you need. It's not what you want, but this is what you need. I was so grateful to be clean again, because the fentanyl was so scary. Like, it really, I can't put it into words, but it was not, there was no fun. It was nothing but a horror show. Right.
Yeah.
And when I was out of it, I was like, I couldn't even believe I was clean. The same way I couldn't believe I was relapsing again. I was like, how did the stars line up that I'm clean again? Like, this is insane. And like, the gratitude has never left me. Like, that's what keeps me going. Right. So
yeah, that's incredible that you were able to make that deal with yourself and your parents and stick to it, and just, and just keep pushing forward, and to have that awareness, I think at that time, to say, this isn't how I want to feel, but this is what I have to feel right now. I have to go through the pain of this, but I have to keep pushing forward, and I have to keep wanting for that next best thing or the next right thing in my life.
Yeah.
Rebuilding from scratch, right?
Even at my darkest times, there was something inside of me that told me that I was going to be okay. Right. Like, I always, it may have been like a little bit of arrogance, but in my heart, I felt like I was going to make it. And once I got clean again, and like, I guess I should say my last couple of weeks of using, I was all alone in bed, and all I thought about was all the mistakes I've made along the way. Right. How did I end up using again, even though I've been equipped with all this knowledge, all these tools, all this, what did I do wrong? Right. And what it came down to was my behavior. Right. And I was just like, I can't be a good guy 90% of the time. As they say in 12 Step, I have to practice the principles in all of my affairs. Right. I have to communicate for me, myself, I can say what I came up with was that it was about communicating healthy boundaries. Is that the reason why I relapsed? Was that I wouldn't communicate my boundaries. My boundaries would get broken. I would hold a resentment, or I would act out, and then the consequences would come, and then I have the desire to use again. They would come back. So then once I got to that point with my parents, I had already reflected on the path, like what I need to do, what I can't do. I was taught a saying from an old mentor that in the doing comes the understanding. And, I did everything that I couldn't do, and I learned the stuff that I could do. And I just decided that this was the time to set out, and like, enough was enough. Right.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, I think those little sort of pieces, those little kind of like helpful little sayings, and at certain times in our lives, we probably think these are so cliche and stuff, but like these old timers giving us these little kind of nuggets of truth, or it's really interesting to like look back on that and say, like, wow, I really needed that at that time, and that really actually did help shape the trajectory of the rest of my life up until this moment. And so in the last 3.5 years, then what do you do on a daily basis to maintain your recovery and keep moving forward with that in that same spirit?
The last treatment center that I went to was it was actually the only treatment center that I went to that was non 12 step based. It was a sort of like a holistic approach to recovery. It was more of a clinical approach. So we talked about there's a book, a workbook, Mind Over Mood, that encompasses a lot of CBT and DBT sort of like tools to use. Which I really, especially the DBT ones, I found really helpful. So I went through some training with a therapist while I was at treatment. So I used some of those sort of like tools that I was taught. And a lot of them are very similar to 12 step, I do a lot of meditation. Meditation is
Yeah.
very big for me. Multiple times a day, different forms, whether it's walking meditations, reflection, contemplations.
Mm-hmm.
I give thanks every day. Like I don't, where I stand in my program is I don't necessarily believe in God, but I have a strong belief in the spirit of the universe.
Yeah.
So I give thanks to that. I am in a position in life today where I am more than happy with everything I have.
Yeah.
Even if I never gained more, my life was so bad that where I am at today feels like a dream come true.
For sure. And I think that you just living in gratitude every day just kind of solidifies that fact as well too, right? Like you're grateful for every day you have and the things that you've gone through and where you are in your life today. And I think that's an important thing, like just the gratitude piece for a lot of people. It's a very simple concept, but like it gives back so much, right?
Yeah, it's everything. It's for me at least, and I stay in touch with recovery friends. I can tell you a big tool that I gained in this last 3.5 years was how to use social media in my recovery,
Yeah.
and just connecting with people like yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And staying in touch with friends and sharing memes or reading inspirational quotes.
Yeah.
Heroin is a first thing in the morning, first thing when you wake up sort of drug. And I needed something to replace that. So for me, my coffee in the morning, playing on my phone, it gives me that sort of like fun in the morning, something to like look forward to, moment of reflection. Sometimes it's joking around, sometimes it's serious, depending on my mood, right?
Right.
And then, I also I make sure that I take a holistic approach to my recovery. So the food that I eat, my sleep
Yep.
hygiene, I
Mm-hmm.
exercise, the state of my room. If my home is messy, I know that there's something going on inside of me that I'm there, that I need to address it, because I
Yeah.
need things to be orderly, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh man, I'm just smiling because I can really relate to that. And now I live with an 8-year-old, so it's next to impossible to ever feel like, you know. But I totally get that, and I think all that stuff is really important. The sleep hygiene thing is huge. And actually, I really do believe in that. Like if your surroundings are in order, if you're living in a space that's in order, it brings a little bit of peace to your emotional state and what's going on inside of you. And it's kind of a reflection of if my head and my heart are in order, then my surroundings will also be. And I think it's a good little kind of hack or indicator of like, okay, when things are starting to look like a little shabby on the outside here, like things are being left out with that normally would be put away, and yeah, maybe there's something else going on that I have to look a little more, turn towards myself and actually look inward about like what does that really mean. Like it's not just dirty dishes in the sink. It's like it's the fact, like there's something going on that inside me that has allowed that to happen, because otherwise my house would be in order. So I think it's a good little indicator.
100%. And
Mm-hmm.
like for me, one of the biggest things entering recovery was I walked in just like the rest of us, just like crippled with guilt and shame, right?
Yeah.
And one of the first questions I asked was like, what do I do about this? And one of my mentors says, well, you need to start working on forgiving yourself. And I said, well, how do I do that? He's like, by taking care of yourself, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so, that's all part of it. So the self-care piece, whether it's the state of my home or, paying my bills on time or whatever it might be, being reliable. I mean, it's how I, forgive myself for the past and how I move into a place of like self-love.
For sure, for sure. And I think to add to that is also, if we as people in recovery continue to live, to treat ourselves a certain way and respect ourselves, respect other people around us, and continue to grow in recovery, we're also kind of checking that box of a living amends to the other people who have been harmed by our behaviors in the past, and that sort of thing, by acknowledging the fact that that's not who we are today. And, you know, if things go the way we'd like to see them go, that won't ever be who we are anymore. And, I've learned from that lesson, and it's my living amends to anybody who I've hurt that I haven't been able to directly make amends to, that, that's not me anymore. I'm a completely different person. And I live like that every day. And I think that's really important for us as people in recovery, just to always, that keep pushing for that next best thing, that next right move, that next right, like whatever it may be, reaction, action, because it's a reflection of who we want to become and who we are today, and not who we were back then.
Definitely.
Yeah. I want to thank you for sharing your story, Adrian. And, I'm really grateful for our friendship, and, the fact that we've been able to meet and connect in the online meeting space, and actually be able to carry that friendship outside of the rooms. And let's hope in the next couple of weeks we can actually get some FaceTime in together, and actually, meet up in person, and have some,
for sure,
some chats, and continue to be of service to each other in the world of recovery.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And I appreciate everything that you've done for me since we've met, all the conversations, and just having me. So it's really nice to, meet other people, like a person like yourself, and just, gain the wisdom and knowledge, and just participate. So thank you.
Yeah, man, it goes both ways for sure. And so finally, where can people find you if they're looking to connect online?
Sure. Yeah. My Instagram is Adrian David Stein. It's like a avatar of a bartender. And then my email is adrian@dnadrinksolutions.com. Anybody who feels they want to reach out or ask questions or connect are very welcome to.
Awesome, man. Well, again, I want to thank you, and I really appreciate you being of service, and sharing this with us. I know it's not an easy thing for people to talk about, but you've shared openly and honestly, and I know that many people are going to learn and be inspired by your story.
Thank you for having me. It was definitely a trip down memory lane, for sure.
For sure.
A lot of things I hadn't thought about for a while, but really appreciate you having me, and I really appreciate you facilitating this forum. It's great for everyone, including myself. So thank you.
Yeah, man. All right. Well, I appreciate you, and you have yourself an awesome week.